Billionaire husband's pregnant wife went missing. Mistress's dark secret was exposed. A battered phone vibrates in the stillness of the lush Harrington Estates solarium. Under the moonlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, the message on the screen reads, "She's gone." The news cuts through the gentle warmth of the summer night, igniting a storm of confusion and fear. Anastasia Harrington, wealthy heir to one of New York's most influential dynasties and expecting her first child, has vanished without a trace. Her devoted family, the entire household staff, and every corner of the Harrington mansion hold pieces to a puzzle no one can solve. Yet the truth lies just beneath the polished surface, waiting to be revealed. Charles Harrington woke early the next morning. The clock on his nightstand glowed with the digits 5, 12 am too early for a man who rarely greeted the day before 7. Yet sleep was impossible in the wake of the late-night message that had disrupted his life. As he sat up in bed, the haze of half-remembered dreams dissolved into a grim reality. Anastasia was missing. His wife had always been the beacon of joy in his world. Her laughter brightened even the gloomiest days, and her presence made the Harrington mansion feel less like a sprawling fortress and more like a home. Even now, the faint scent of her floral perfume clung to the sheets, reminding him of the warmth that once enveloped their marital bed. But she was gone, vanished without warning, and the hollow space beside him felt agonizingly cold. He rubbed his bleary eyes, trying to stifle the dread that was mounting by the second, dread that overshadowed all else: business deals, philanthropic engagements, the upcoming gala they were set to host for the American Red Cross at the famed Waldorf Astoria. None of it mattered now. He rose, shoulders heavy with tension, and entered the bathroom. Each step echoed in the mansion's corridors, their usual hush now seeming ominous. After splashing cold water on his face, he stared at his reflection. A pale, tired visage stared back. His dark hair, once neatly groomed, was disheveled. Fine lines etched his forehead, and his blue eyes brimmed with concern. Today the mirror did not reflect a confident millionaire accustomed to solving problems with the stroke of a pen. Instead, it showed a man haunted by a single fear: losing the woman he cherished. He dressed hastily, throwing on a crisp white shirt and charcoal slacks. He typically spent careful minutes selecting his suit and cufflinks, an outward reflection of the image he had cultivated as the head of the Harrington empire. But he felt no urgency to maintain appearances now. The missing gold cufflinks on his dresser hardly registered. There was only one priority. Descending the grand staircase, he found the household staff assembled in the foyer. Never had Charles seen them so solemn. Carmen, the head housekeeper, wrung her hands in worry, her eyes puffy from crying. James, the longtime butler, stood stiffly at attention, waiting to deliver whatever small pieces of information he had gathered. Their concern was sincere. Anastasia had always treated them like family. "Sir," James said gently, stepping forward, "we've contacted the local authorities. They'll be here shortly. Is there anything else you require?" Charles felt a lump form in his throat. He'd inherited the Harrington fortune, but his wealth did little to soften the blow of personal tragedy. "Ensure the gates remain guarded. Nobody leaves or enters without my permission. And if any of you recall seeing or hearing something unusual, come forward immediately." A ripple of agreement passed through the staff. Charles nodded and dismissed them, heading into the study. This room, panelled in dark mahogany and smelling faintly of leather and old books, was where he typically negotiated multi-million-dollar deals. Today, it felt like a sanctuary he might flee to for answers or comfort. He sat behind the massive oak desk, rummaging through his phone for any clue. He called Anastasia's number again. It went straight to voicemail, just like the dozen times he'd tried before dawn. "Please," "Pick up," he whispered, as if the silent phone might somehow relent and ring. A soft knock on the door disrupted his silent pleading. Detective Marjorie Lang, accompanied by her partner Detective David Ross, stepped in. Lang was a woman in her late 30s with a firm demeanor and penetrating gaze. She introduced herself politely. Ross, older and quieter, observed the room with methodical calm. "We understand your wife is missing, Mr. Harrington," Lang began, scanning the room's opulent furnishings, the glimmering awards from the Harrington Charitable Foundation. "We need to ask you a few questions." He gestured for them to sit. "Please, anything to help find Anastasia." "How long has she been gone?" Lang asked, flipping open a small notepad. "Less than 24 hours, Charles replied, voice strained. "I got a text, only 2 words, SHE's gone." It came from an unknown number around midnight. Ross raised an eyebrow. "Did she leave a note? Any indication she might be?" "No," Charles interrupted. "She was excited about the baby. We'd just come from a routine check up at Mount Sinai Hospital. Everything seemed fine." At the mention of Mount Sinai Hospital, Lang's pen paused. She looked up, perhaps noting the specificity of that well-known medical facility in Manhattan. "Were there any arguments or tension between you two recently?" Charles hesitated. Should he mention the rumors that had begun swirling months ago about him and another woman? The tabloids occasionally snapped him in photos with business associates, fueling gossip that lacked substance, or so he wanted to believe. Yet guilt gnawed at him. He wasn't the perfect husband. Nobody was. But he'd done nothing to harm Anastasia. We had the usual disagreements, small things, but never anything serious. "We were happy," he said, his tone quietly imploring them to believe him. Marjorie nodded, her expression neutral, before continuing. "Have there been threats, Mr. Harrington? Blackmail attempts? Anything unusual for a man in your position?" Charles took a moment, scanning through recent memory for business enemies or personal conflicts. "My father's legacy was complicated. Some old rivalries exist, but it's mostly competition in real estate and investment circles. I haven't received direct threats." Ross noted something on a tablet. "Will dust for prints, examine surveillance footage. Meanwhile, if you think of anything, call us immediately." The detectives left to speak with the staff, and Charles sank back into his leather chair, a wave of exhaustion flooding him. His thoughts raced. Anastasia's pregnancy was well along. She was due in just 3 short months. Her daily schedule revolved around baby preparations, philanthropic work, and the occasional social function. He couldn't fathom any reason for her disappearance. A memory rose unbidden in his mind, the night Anastasia had told him she was pregnant. They were standing on a balcony overlooking Central Park, the city's lights glittering like 1,000 tiny suns. She'd handed him a small box. Inside was a pair of baby socks. He recalled his initial disbelief, melting into euphoric laughter. She smiled, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "We'll be a family now." The realization that he might never see that radiant joy on her face again terrified him. His phone buzzed, cutting through the reverie. He scrambled to answer, hoping it was Anastasia or some new lead. Instead, Vanessa Morland's sultry voice spilled into his ear. "Charles," the first heard the news. "This is terrible." Vanessa was a rising star in the fashion industry, known for her dramatic runway shows and extravagant parties. They'd met at a fundraiser months ago. Despite swirling rumors about them, Charles insisted their relationship was strictly business. After all, Vanessa was designing some of the pieces for the upcoming Harrington Foundation charity gala. But her voice, always laced with a seductive undertone, unsettled him. "Now's not a good time, Vanessa," he said curtly, though he tried to maintain civility. "If this is about the gala, we can talk later." Vanessa gave a breathy sigh. "I'm worried about you. I know how much Anastasia means to you. Do you need anything? Someone to talk to? I can come by." "No," he interjected firmly. "The police are here. I need to focus on finding my wife." With that, he ended the call. Setting the phone down, Charles stared at the wood grain of his desk. Though the conversation had been brief, it stirred something in him: guilt, fear, or some combination of both. He told himself it was only about the rumors. He had nothing to hide. And yet, a knot of unease formed in his stomach. He needed to do more. Staying cooped up in the study, waiting for the police to sift through formalities, wasn't an option. He wanted to pound the pavement himself, ask passers-by if they'd seen a woman matching Anastasia's description, plaster the city with her photograph. But the detectives were the experts. He had to trust their process. Still, doing nothing felt like a betrayal. A soft knock at the study door signaled James's cautious entry. "Sir, Detective Lang would like you to see something." Charles followed James down the hallway to the security room. A wall of monitors flickered, each showing different vantage points of the estate: the front gate, the expansive gardens, the perimeter walls, the rear driveway. Lang stood with her arms folded, studying the footage. Ross hovered near a technician who was rewinding the files from the previous night. Ross paused a frame. "Mr. Harrington, take a look." On the screen, faintly illuminated by a security lamp, a figure in a dark coat slipped through the side gate around midnight. The figure was slim, possibly female, though the camera angle was poor. Their movements were cautious, as though they were trying not to be detected. "Did Anastasia leave by the side gate?" Charles asked, voice strained. "Or was someone coming in to take her?" Lang tapped a pen against the desk. "We don't know yet. The facial features aren't clear. Could be your wife or someone else. We'll enhance the image. See what we can glean." Charles scrutinized the footage again, wishing for more clarity. The angles were too obscure. The figure disappeared out of frame after a few seconds, leaving only questions in their wake. Returning to the foyer, Charles was taken aback by the hush that settled over the mansion. With the staff anxious and the house in partial lockdown, it felt like the entire building was holding its breath, anticipating news that might shatter them all. Carmen, her eyes rimmed with tears, quietly approached him. "Is there any word, sir?" He shook his head. "Not yet. She's going to be okay," the housekeeper insisted, blinking away her tears. "Miss S. Harrington is a strong woman." He nodded appreciatively, though he wasn't certain whether he was comforting Carmen or himself. Anastasia was indeed strong, but she was also pregnant and missing. Concern gnawed at every corner of his mind, refusing to loosen its grip. In the days that followed, the police combed through the estate. They found no signs of forced entry, no ransom note, no calls demanding money for her safe return. Each passing hour was an agony, a slow bleed of hope. The city's press eventually caught wind of the situation, and a discreet chaos ensued. Photographers camped outside the gates, tabloids churned out sensational headlines, and speculation soared. Some accused Charles of wrongdoing, while others painted Anastasia as having run off. Neither possibility felt remotely true to those who knew them. To distract himself, Charles threw his energy into coordinating with the detectives, distributing missing person flyers, and consulting private investigators. He rarely slept, surviving on black coffee and raw determination. Guilt and worry formed a relentless drumbeat in his mind. The portrait of Anastasia in the mansion's gallery haunted him, her radiant smile, her glossy brown hair, and the tender curve of her belly. He would stop at nothing to see her return home safely. Days stretched into a full week. Then a call came. It was late afternoon, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of the foyer. Charles was reviewing new leads with Detective Lang when his phone rang. The caller ID was again unknown. Heart pounding, he motioned for Lang to record the call. he answered, his voice quivering. "Hello?" A raspy whisper came through. "If you want to find your wife, come to the old pier on the Hudson. Alone. Midnight." Before Charles could respond, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, adrenaline surging. Lang's eyes narrowed, and Ross, who had been silently listening, placed a hand on Charles's shoulder. "We'll trace that call. Don't do anything rash." But Charles's mind was already made up. He had a lead, however dubious, and he would follow it, no matter the risk. He needed to save Anastasia. Nothing else mattered. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Charles found himself driving through the dimly lit streets of Manhattan, passing glittering skyscrapers and quiet residential blocks. The city's hum was subdued at this hour. He tried to calm his breathing. He'd insisted to the detectives that he had to go alone to maintain the integrity of the lead, but they vowed to tail him at a distance for his own safety. He parked near the abandoned pier, the air thick with salt and decay. The old wooden planks creaked underfoot as he approached. Streetlights were few and far between. Shadows clung to every corner, and the only sound was the lapping of water against the dilapidated docks. "Hello?" Charles called into the darkness. "I'm here, just like you asked," silence replied. Then a shuffle of movement. A hooded figure emerged from behind a stack of old crates. "Charles Harrington," came the raspy voice. Charles steeled himself. "Who are you? Where's Anastasia?" The figure tossed a tattered envelope at his feet. "Answers lie within, but tread carefully. Not everything is as it seems." Then, before Charles could react, the stranger disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the echo of footsteps and the crash of water against the pier's pylons. With trembling hands, Charles picked up the envelope. By the faint glow of a distant street lamp, he peered inside. Photographs. Dozens of them, his breath caught in his throat. In each one, he was standing intimately close to Vanessa Morland, at events, dinners, private meetings. Some photos were innocently professional, others taken at angles that implied more. One image showed him brushing a strand of hair from Vanessa's face. Another captured them leaving a hotel, though he recalled it as a short business meeting over a potential property development. But seen out of context, the images felt damning. Attached was a note scrawled in bold letters. "She knows. Keep your secrets or lose what matters most." Charles's pulse hammered. He felt sick. Was this a blackmail attempt? Did Anastasia discover these misleading images, prompting her to run away, or was someone else orchestrating an even darker plan? The possibility of Vanessa's involvement slithered into his thoughts, uninvited and unwelcome. But she had no reason to harm Anastasia, did she? Behind him, a rustle in the darkness caused him to spin around. Detective Lang stepped forward, gun raised, Ross close behind. Their eyes darted about, scanning for any threat. Charles held up the envelope. "They left these." Lang gestured to Ross, who seized the photos. "We'll analyze them. Let's get out of here. It's not safe." Though Charles was grateful for their intervention, he left the pier with more questions than answers. The night's events cast new shadows over an already dire situation, and the note's cryptic words played on repeat in his head. Back at the mansion, the near-empty halls greeted him like silent witnesses. He retreated to his study, poured himself a stiff drink, and stared at the envelope's contents once more. Each photo felt like an accusation, the note a curse. He downed the liquor in one gulp, hoping for a reprieve from the storm of guilt and confusion. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by nightmares of Anastasia, reaching out to him from a darkened room, calling his name only to vanish the moment he got close. He awoke drenched in sweat to the pale dawn light, unsure if he had the strength to endure another day without her. The next few days brought an onslaught of scandalous headlines. Sensational rumors surged. Millionaire's mistress, pregnant wife vanishes amid scandal. Vanessa's name was plastered across tabloids. The public relished every morsel of speculation. Only Detective Lang's stern gaze reminded Charles to remain focused. She redoubled her investigation, but leads were scarce. Charles sought solace in the nursery Anastasia had meticulously planned. The pastel walls, the crib draped with a delicate canopy, the shelves lined with stuffed animals, each detail spoke of Anastasia's love for the life growing inside her. He sat in the rocking chair, exhaustion pulling him deeper into its embrace, imagining her gently swaying here, hand on her belly. He recalled her excitement as she debated color schemes and cribs, her eyes glowing with maternal devotion. From the corner, a soft meow startled him. Duchess, Anastasia's cat, padded over to rub against his leg. He scooped her up, burying his face in her fur, and let the tears he'd been holding back escape. He felt alone, defeated, and directionless. If only he had a clue, a sign. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Heart racing, he grabbed it. A single text glowed on the screen. "Ask your mistress. She knows more than she admits." Charles's skin prickled with unease. Could it be true? Had Vanessa withheld information? Their interactions had been strictly about business collaborations and social engagements. Yet rumors suggested she wanted more from him, that she envied Anastasia. The text hammered the possibility that Vanessa might be connected to Anastasia's disappearance. A surge of anger propelled him up from the chair. He dialed Vanessa's number. The phone rang without answer. Undeterred, Charles decided to visit her loft in Soho. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Dark clouds gathered overhead as he navigated the congested streets. The city's usual bustle seemed more oppressive under the threat of rain. Arriving at Vanessa's building, he was greeted by polished chrome doors and a minimalist lobby. He took the elevator to the top floor. The hallway was quiet, the plush carpeting muffling his steps as he approached her door. He knocked, heart pounding. After a moment's silence, the door opened a crack. Vanessa peered out, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and apprehension. "Charles, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk." He pushed past her into the loft, ignoring her protests. The space was exactly as he remembered, spacious, filled with modern art and overlooking the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. She closed the door behind him, crossing her arms defensively. "You look terrible," she observed. He wasted no time. "Vanessa, someone says you know more about Anastasia's disappearance than you're telling." She took a step back, genuine shock in her eyes. "Are you accusing me? Why would I?" "I'm not accusing," he snapped. "I'm asking. The messages claim you have a secret, something that could unravel everything. Photos of us have surfaced, taken out of context. If you're being blackmailed, if you're in trouble, tell me." Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes. She sank onto her white leather sofa, voice trembling. "I never meant for any of this to happen, but I've been getting messages, too threatening ones, warning me to stay silent or else." He moved closer. "Silent about what?" She swallowed hard, looking at him with remorse etched on her face. I've made mistakes. After we started working together, I developed feelings for you. I know it was wrong. You're married. But there was a person, a shady figure, who approached me, offering a large sum if I could seduce you, record it somehow, use it as leverage. Charles's jaw tightened. "Leverage for what?" Vanessa's voice became a whisper. "I don't know. They said the Harrington name is powerful, that getting you entangled in a scandal could be profitable for certain competitors. I refused at first, but then I had financial troubles. My business was faltering. I was desperate. So I considered it. But I never went through with it. Instead, I told them I was done. They threatened me, said they'd ruin me if I didn't cooperate. And now Anastasia is gone." The story struck him like a blow. Had this unknown party kidnapped Anastasia to force compliance? Or was it something more twisted? The puzzle pieces rattled in his mind, forming half-finished pictures. He crouched before Vanessa, searching her face, Why didn't you come to me sooner? We could have stopped this. She gazed at him with tearful regret. I was scared. I thought I could handle it. Then Anastasia disappeared. I feel responsible. Charles took a moment to process. Anger, betrayal, and pity warred within him. But above all, he needed to find Anastasia. We have to bring this information to the police. Vanessa nodded, wiping her tears. I'll cooperate fully. I'll do anything. In that moment, Charles realized he had a potential ally. Whatever Vanessa's past transgressions, she was scared. And fear often turned people into accomplices or informants, depending on which side they stood. As the thunder rumbled outside, they agreed to share everything with Detective Lang. If an unknown entity was manipulating both of them, exposing the truth might be the only path to saving Anastasia. As he left Vanessa's loft, Charles felt a flicker of renewed determination. He still didn't know who orchestrated Anastasia's disappearance, but at least he had a direction. He'd unravel this conspiracy thread by thread until he found the woman he loved. The storm broke overhead, rain lashing against the city. Charles welcomed it, letting the downpour soak him as he made his way to his car, adrenaline pumping. For the first time in weeks, he felt a small spark of hope. But would it be enough to guide him through the darkness ahead? That same evening, Charles and Vanessa found themselves seated across from Detective Lang and Detective Ross at the police precinct. The neon glow of the city's billboards filtered in through the narrow windows, casting shifting colors across the room. The harsh overhead light illuminated every taut line on Vanessa's face as she revealed her hidden dealings and the cryptic threats that had been made against her. Lang listened intently, arms crossed, occasionally exchanging significant glances with Ross. When Vanessa finished, her voice raw and quavering, the detective flipped her notepad shut. We need names, Miss Morland. Who contacted you? Vanessa shook her head, despair clear in her eyes. I never saw their faces. They communicated through blocked numbers and anonymous emails. Once, they left an envelope with money at my office's reception desk. No return address. Ross leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. Do you have anything else, a phone number, even if it's disconnected, or an email address? Vanessa pulled her phone from her purse. I forwarded it all to myself, in case something went wrong. Lang took the device carefully, passing it to a tech specialist. We'll do what we can. Cyber forensics can sometimes trace even the most determined anonymizers. She turned to Charles. This could be the breakthrough we need. But don't get your hopes up too quickly. Whoever did this is meticulous. Charles nodded, shoulders heavy with renewed tension. I just want Anastasia back. After a barrage of further questions, including references to each suspicious photo found at the pier, Charles and Vanessa were released into the chilly night. Their breath fogged in the air as they stepped outside. Charles paused on the precinct steps, glancing over at Vanessa. The guilt in her eyes was unmistakable, but so was her resolve. We'll find her, he said softly. As much to himself as to Vanessa, she nodded and they parted ways. Over the next few days, the police examined Vanessa's phone records and emails, searching for digital fingerprints. Private investigators hired by Charles dug into possible business rivals, anyone who stood to benefit from harming the Harrington name. Rumors circulated that a competitor in the real estate sector had engaged in unsavory tactics before, but no solid link emerged. Stress weighed on Charles. Reporters seemed to circle like vultures. He had to sneak out of the mansion through a back service exit to avoid the throng outside. Each time a camera flashed, each time a microphone was thrust in his face, the question stung anew. Where is your wife? He was about to learn how far these conspirators would go. One afternoon, as Charles was sifting through Anastasia's personal documents for clues, James the butler informed him of a package that had arrived by courier, no return address. Charles's heart pounded as he carefully opened it. Inside, he found an ornate music box silver, with delicate engravings reminiscent of the Victorian era. His breath caught in his throat. It was the same music box Anastasia had loved at an antique store in Chelsea. She had admired it, even cradled it in her palms, but decided not to purchase it because the price was exorbitant. He lifted the lid. A gentle lullaby began to play, its melody achingly familiar. Nestled within was a single piece of paper. In elegant script it read, "Her lullaby awaits a mother's embrace." Time is running out. Charles's heart seized. This was no simple taunt. It was a reference to the unborn child, and it hammered home the captor's awareness of Anastasia's pregnancy. He realized he was dealing with someone who not only wanted leverage, but who took pleasure in taunting him. Clutching the music box, Charles rushed to call Detective Lang. She arrived within the hour, her jaw clenched at the sight of the cryptic message. "They're escalating," she muttered. "We'll fingerprint the box and see if we can trace its origin." For days, the lullaby haunted Charles's every thought. The ticking clock of Anastasia's pregnancy overshadowed all else. Each passing moment drew them closer to her due date. Was she receiving medical care? Was she safe? A restless night found Charles pacing the length of the mansion's second-floor corridor, the hush of the house broken only by the distant hum of the city beyond. In the darkness, Anastasia's absence pressed on him like a physical weight. In a desperate bid for answers, Charles commissioned a second private investigator, an ex-CIA operative named Samantha Gray. She was reputed to have a sharp eye for detail and an uncanny ability to navigate the murky underbelly of New York's elite. Samantha arrived at the mansion looking poised and determined. Her handshake was firm, her gaze unwavering. "I won't promise miracles, Mr. Harrington," she told him plainly, "but I will follow every lead, no matter how small." She began by reviewing the security footage, the ransom notes, the suspicious photos, and the newly arrived music box. The entire mansion was at her disposal. By the end of her first day, she had formed theories, some plausible, some far-fetched, but she insisted every angle be pursued. "There's a chance," Samantha said to Charles, "that the kidnappers wanted you to suspect Vanessa, to turn you against each other. Dividing potential allies is a common tactic, but we need more concrete proof." Late one night, Samantha cornered Charles in the study. "I've been digging into your father's records," she said, setting a thick file on the desk. "It appears that the Harrington empire wasn't built without stepping on some dangerous toes. There's one name that keeps popping up, Roland Pierce." Charles frowned. He recognized the name, an old rival of his father's, known for shady business practices. He'd vanished from the public eye years ago after a high-profile lawsuit. What does he have to do with this? Samantha flipped through her notes. "Roland Pierce lost a huge development contract to your family's firm, Harrington Holdings, nearly 2 decades ago. After that, his fortunes declined, and he was implicated in a bribery scandal. According to some rumors, he vowed revenge, blaming your father for orchestrating his downfall." Charles felt a chill settle in his gut. Could Pierce be behind this? Had he nursed a grudge all these years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? It was possible. But would Pierce resort to kidnapping a pregnant woman? As the investigation wore on, a sense of claustrophobia tightened around Charles. The mansion's opulence felt hollow without Anastasia's warmth. He couldn't walk by the grand piano without remembering the nights she would play softly, or pass the dining room without seeing the ghost of her smile at the head of the table. Every moment reminded him of her absence. Vanessa, for her part, cooperated fully. She gave the police the emails, phone records, everything, yet her involvement remained a contentious issue in the media. If she walked down the street, paparazzi hounded her with questions. She claimed innocence, but suspicion lingered. Now that her business deals were scrutinized, some of her investors pulled out, fearing scandal. Vanessa confided to Charles that she felt cursed, unable to escape the web she'd stumbled into. Charles tried to remain detached, but her confession stirred both sympathy and anger. She had, after all, unwittingly set events in motion. Then came a chilling development. Detective Lang summoned Charles to the station to review newly obtained security footage from a small facility on the outskirts of the city. The grainy video showed a hooded figure entering an abandoned warehouse late at night. In the corner of one frame, a woman's silhouette could be seen, seemingly captive. The figure in the hood moved with deliberate caution, as though aware of the camera's presence. Lang paused the tape. The silhouette is consistent with Anastasia's build, though it's impossible to confirm. We're working on analyzing the height and posture. Charles leaned in, heart thundering. Where is this place? An old industrial site near the harbor, Lang replied. It's been closed for years. We're preparing a raid, but we need to be sure she's there. We can't risk spooking them and moving Anastasia again. Charles's frustration mounted. She could be in danger now. If that's Anastasia, we're doing everything we can, Lang said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. But we must tread carefully. Despite the detective's assurances, Charles found the weight unbearable. Days dragged on as the police prepared their operation, gathering intelligence and scanning the area for any sign of suspicious activity. Samantha coordinated with the police, convinced that they were on the cusp of a breakthrough. In the meantime, the media frenzy escalated. Online forums brimmed with wild theories. Some cast Charles as a villain, orchestrating a grand publicity stunt. Others speculated that Anastasia had staged her own disappearance. Still others insisted a scorned mistress had sought revenge. Each rumor sliced deeper into Charles's psyche. He yearned to go on television and denounce the speculation, to proclaim his innocence and Anastasia's victimhood, but the police advised against it. Better to remain quiet, so as not to jeopardize the investigation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Detective Lang called Charles with urgent news. We have credible evidence that Anastasia is indeed being held in that warehouse. A rescue operation is set for tonight. You should stay put. We don't want you in harm's way. Charles agreed, but as he hung up, an internal battle raged. Every fiber of his being wanted to storm that warehouse, consequences be damned. Yet he understood that the professionals were better equipped. He paced the length of the mansion's foyer, cell phone clutched so tightly his knuckles turned white. The staff hovered anxiously, silent prayers written on their faces. The clock struck midnight, and Charles could bear it no longer. He phoned Samantha. "I need to be there." "Charles, listen," Lang explicitly said. "I don't care. I can't sit here while my wife could be rescued or lost forever." Samantha hesitated. "Fine, but stay in the car. I'll text you the location. Do not compromise the operation." Heart pounding, Charles grabbed his coat and keys. He told James to lock up behind him. The old butler merely nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "Bring her home, sir." The drive felt surreal. As he navigated the deserted streets, memories of Anastasia flooded his mind. The times they danced barefoot in the living room, the mornings they read the paper together in bed, the look of pure joy on her face when she first felt the baby kick. Each recollection bolstered his determination. He arrived at a vantage point near the warehouse where Samantha waited in an unmarked car. Rain drizzled, turning the grime-laced pavement slick. Police vehicles surrounded the building, lights off to maintain stealth. Lang and Ross were stationed at a command post, coordinating armed officers dressed in tactical gear. Charles's heart hammered as they relayed final instructions over their radios. The go signal came. With precise efficiency, the SWAT team breached the warehouse. The flash of stun grenades lit the night, followed by shouts and gunfire. Charles strained to see through the gloom, breath catching in his throat every time a shot echoed. He gripped the dashboard, pulse roaring in his ears. Minutes passed like hours. Samantha had one hand on her gun, the other covering her phone as she listened to the police scanner. Finally, a voice crackled through the radio. Suspects in custody. Checking perimeter. We have a woman, unconscious but alive, repeat, unconscious but alive, calling for medical. Charles needed no further prompt. Against Samantha's protests, he bolted from the car. Rain pelted him as he raced toward the building. The strobing lights of police cars painted the scene in harsh reds and blues. An ambulance backed up to the warehouse entrance, its sirens silent but lights flashing. He sprinted inside, weaving past officers. The warehouse interior was dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. Crates and debris littered the floor. Adrenaline powered him through the chaos until he found a group of medics crouched over a figure on a tattered mattress. "Anastasia," he breathed, falling to his knees beside her. She lay pale, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. Bruises marred her wrists, suggesting she'd been bound. Her face was gaunt, as though she hadn't eaten well in days. But she was alive. Relief swelled in Charles's chest, tears blurring his vision as he grasped her hand. "I'm here," he whispered, pressing trembling lips to her forehead. A medic gently guided him aside, checking her vitals. "We need to get her to a hospital," the medic said, voice urgent. "She's malnourished and possibly dehydrated. Heart rate is weak. She could go into premature labor." As they lifted Anastasia onto a stretcher, Charles followed, ignoring every protocol. He needed to stay with her, to reassure her. He saw Detective Lang stepping in, giving him a nod that conveyed both sympathy and the assurance that she would handle the aftermath. Meanwhile, Ross stood over a pair of cuffed suspects, haggard-looking men who glared at Charles with venom. No sign of the hooded mastermind or Roland Pierce, but capturing these men was a start. Inside the ambulance, Charles held Anastasia's hand through the frantic blur of medical checks. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, unfocused. Charles managed a smile through his tears, stroking her hair. "It's me, love. You're safe now. We'll get through this." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Weakness clung to her every breath. The paramedics applied and the fourth administered fluids and checked her vitals. The ride to Mount Sinai Hospital felt endless, even though it was only minutes away. Once at the hospital, the staff whisked Anastasia into the emergency ward. Charles was left in the corridor, exhausted and drenched from the rain. His clothes stuck to his skin, and his mind swirled with a mixture of fear, relief, and anger at those who had dared to harm his wife and unborn child. Samantha arrived, similarly soaked. "They'll take good care of her here," she said softly. "You did it, you got her back." Charles nodded absently, thinking only of Anastasia in that hospital room, fighting for her life and that of their child. He gripped Samantha's arm, voice raw with emotion. "Now we make them pay." The hours that followed were a tangle of paperwork, medical updates, and tearful gratitude. At one point, while Charles paced the corridor outside Anastasia's room, a nurse emerged with news. "Your wife is stable, but she'll need careful monitoring. The trauma and stress may induce early labor. We're doing everything possible for both of them." Exhaling shakily, Charles lowered himself into a plastic chair. Relief flooded him, though tempered by fear of what lay ahead. At least she was alive, and that was more than he dared hope for during those dark days. He closed his eyes, offering a silent prayer to any higher power that might listen. When he was finally permitted a brief visit, Charles entered the room to find Anastasia resting. An oxygen tube lay across her face, and the fourth dripped fluids into her arm. The beep of the heart monitor offered a steady rhythm, a fragile soundtrack to this reunion. She slowly turned her head, her eyes focusing on him with recognition. He approached quietly, tears welling again. "Anastasia," he whispered, taking her hand gently. "I'm here. You're safe." She opened her mouth to speak, voice a raspy whisper. "Charles, the baby?" He leaned closer, tears slipping free. "The baby's fine. Doctors say you both need rest, but you're safe now. That's all that matters." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, and her chest quivered with silent sobs. In that moment, words were unnecessary. They both felt a surge of relief, love, and gratitude just to exist side by side again. The rest of the world, the kidnappers, the scandal, the betrayal, fell away in the face of a miracle. She was back. For the first time in weeks, Charles allowed himself to hope. Yet amid the quiet hum of hospital machinery, he also felt a spark of determination ignite. Whoever was responsible would not escape the consequences. Anastasia's resilience was remarkable, and he would match it with his own resolve. The Harrington name had power, and Charles intended to use it to ensure no one else ever endured such terror. In the days that followed, Anastasia's condition slowly improved. She regained her appetite, her color returned, and her spirit, while shaken, showed the same tenacity that Charles had always loved. Doctors ran a battery of tests to ensure the baby remained healthy despite the ordeal. Each ultrasound showed a beating heart, each day a step closer to a safer term. During one quiet afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the hospital window, Anastasia stirred and beckoned Charles closer. She looked exhausted yet determined. "I remember something," she said, voice still scratchy. "When they moved me, I heard one of them mention a name." Charles leaned in, heart quickening. "Who? Tell me." Anastasia's eyes narrowed, struggling to recall. "Pierce," she whispered. "They said Pierce wanted updates." I didn't understand who he was at the time, but they were afraid of him. He was the one in charge. Charles's suspicions crystallized. Roland Pierce was indeed behind it. He brushed a hand across Anastasia's cheek. "We'll get him," he vowed. "He won't hurt us anymore." Her eyes closed, tears clinging to her lashes. "Charles, I was so scared, not just for me, but for our baby." He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her brow. "We're together again. That's what matters. Focus on healing. I'll deal with Pierce." With Anastasia out of immediate danger, Charles turned his attention to the hunt for Roland Pierce. Through Samantha's connections and the official police inquiry, they followed a paper trail of shell companies and hidden accounts, all pointing to an elaborate network tied to Pierce. The man had spent years rebuilding his fortune in the shadows, orchestrating a labyrinth of dark deals. Kidnapping Anastasia was likely his final gambit to break the Harrington family from within, possibly to extort money or to drive them into public ruin. The plan might have succeeded had Anastasia not survived. As the evidence mounted, the police issued a warrant for Pierce's arrest. But finding him proved more challenging. He was a ghost, flitting between safe houses, leaving minimal digital footprints. Still, Detective Lang refused to relent. "He'll slip up," she insisted, "and when he does, we'll be there." During this tense waiting period, Charles immersed himself in Anastasia's recovery. He brought her favorite meals under the watchful eye of the hospital's dietary guidelines, made sure she had fresh flowers, and read her the notes of concern and well wishes that poured in from her friends. The staff at Mount Sinai Hospital had grown protective of Anastasia, warding off the more intrusive members of the press who tried to infiltrate the ward. Each quiet moment was a treasure, a testament to the fragility of life and love. When Anastasia was strong enough, she recounted more details of her captivity to the detectives. She remembered being taken in the middle of the night, a cloth pressed to her face that made her lose consciousness. She woke bound in a dimly lit room with two men who treated her roughly but kept her alive. Presumably under orders from someone else, they frequently mentioned instructions from the boss. She endured days in darkness, minimal food, and threats that made her despair for her child's future. But each day she clung to the image of Charles's face, the promise of a better tomorrow. Hearing her ordeal made Charles's blood boil and spurred him to further action. He pressed every contact he had, political allies, business associates, and philanthropic organizations, to help flush Pierce from hiding. Soon, pressure mounted. A few more of Pierce's accomplices were apprehended, and they began naming names to lighten their own sentences. Finally, a breakthrough arrived in the form of an intercepted phone call. Police traced Pierce to a small estate upstate, far from the prying eyes of the city. Detective Lang wasted no time organizing a multi-agency task force to apprehend him. Charles wanted to be there, but she forbade it, reminding him it was a police matter. He relented, focusing on Anastasia, who was nearing the end of her hospital stay. On a sunny afternoon, nearly a month after Anastasia's rescue, Detective Lang called with the update Charles had been waiting for. Pierce was in custody. He'd been arrested without incident, a sallow, furious man who reportedly spat curses at the officers. He's facing kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy charges, among others, Lang reported. He'll be in jail a long time. When Charles relayed the news to Anastasia, a palpable weight lifted from the room. She exhaled in relief, tears filling her eyes. "It's over," she said, a tremor of disbelief in her voice. He nodded, embracing her carefully, mindful of her growing belly. "Yes, love, it's over." But while Pierce's capture closed one chapter of their nightmare, the scars it left behind would take time to heal. Anastasia began physical therapy to regain strength, and the hospital's counselors offered sessions to help her process the trauma. Charles, too, found himself waking from nightmares, heart pounding. He hadn't been the one kidnapped, but the fear of losing the love of his life weighed heavily on him. Through it all, they leaned on each other, forging a bond tempered by adversity. Their marriage was tested by fear, guilt, and uncertainty, but it emerged stronger than ever. The tabloids moved on to fresher scandals, and though rumors lingered, the truth of Vanessa's coerced involvement finally emerged. Vanessa, having cooperated fully with the police, was exonerated of any criminal wrongdoing, though her reputation remained bruised. She apologized to Charles and Anastasia in person. The meeting was tense, tears were shed, but ultimately, Anastasia chose forgiveness, not wanting the bitterness of betrayal to poison her new lease on life. As the summer heat gave way to the crisp air of autumn, Anastasia moved back into the mansion. The staff greeted her with flowers, tears, and applause. She walked through the halls, reacquainting herself with the home that had once felt like a safe haven. Now, each door, each corner held a sense of vulnerability, but day by day she reclaimed it. One crisp morning, as she sipped tea on the balcony with Charles, Anastasia placed his hand gently on her stomach. A strong kick tapped against his palm. Their eyes met, joy illuminating their faces. This child, once a source of radiant hope, had become a beacon guiding them from the darkest storm they had ever known. "I can't wait to meet you," Charles whispered to the unborn baby, tears of gratitude blurring his vision. Anastasia smiled, her eyes shimmering. Life wasn't perfect. The legal proceedings against Pierce stretched on. Charles and Anastasia would likely have to testify, reliving the nightmare. But with each other's support, they felt ready to face it. The malicious schemes that had tried to drive them apart had only served to underscore the depth of their connection. Their story was one of survival, unity, and the unwavering power of love in the face of adversity. Even in the darkest hours, they had found light in each other. And now, with Anastasia safely home and a new life stirring in her womb, they looked forward to the day their child would join them, a living testament to the resilience that had kept them going. The mistress's dark secret had been exposed, the kidnapper unmasked, and the threads of deceit unraveled. In their place, a renewed sense of purpose and hope flourished. In the hush of the Harrington mansion, two hearts beat in quiet harmony, awaiting the arrival of a third. A future, once threatened by greed and betrayal, now promised a chance at healing and new beginnings. A family tested by shadows now stands on the threshold of a brighter tomorrow. Charles and Anastasia's love, once shrouded by scandal and fear, has proven its unbreakable strength. Their journey reminds us that in the darkest moments, hope can still blossom, and the bonds we cherish can illuminate the way forward. As they await the birth of their child, a promise of new beginnings shines like the dawn after a storm. If you were captivated by this story of resilience, betrayal, and ultimate redemption, show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Let others join in uncovering the twists and turns that shaped this gripping tale. Each click spreads the message that love can triumph over the deepest betrayals and that the human spirit can endure unimaginable trials. Stay connected for future stories of hope, strength, and transformation, because together we can navigate life's storms and emerge stronger than ever.